What's up, you guys? It's Lo, Beauty Demon, and I'm back to talk about internet BS. There's so much going on. It's hard to even pick and choose, to be quite honest with you. So I'm going to compress some things into what I hope is a short video, so bear with me. But before I jump into this, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon so you get a notification every time I post, because I don't have a regular upload schedule. Also, everything I say in here is just my opinion. This is just based on what I am seeing play out on the internet, so please don't send anybody any hate, negativity, nothing like that. If you have an opinion about something we're talking about, please leave it in the comments below. That's what they're there for, but keep it respectful, you guys. Okay. So I've been watching all of this stuff play out with Keemstar and Ethan Klein and Trisha and the clash of the podcasts, as I've come to think of it as, because that's what this really is. Trisha is just jumping from podcast to podcast, attacking Ethan and H3H3 podcast, her former podcasting partner from Frenemies. She even went on Keemstar's podcast, and Keemstar has even popped onto other podcasts and talked about this as well. For a little backstory, some people are just like, where did this even really start? We've just always known that Keemstar and Ethan don't get along. We've seen Trisha and Keem not get along, but apparently they've just made up, so good for them, I guess. So the history of Ethan versus Keem goes back to podcasts. Yep. They appeared on each other's podcasts in 2016 and 2017. Keemstar used to have a podcast called Baited Podcast. He had a few different co-hosts in it, but in the beginning, it was Colossal is Crazy and Tommy C. And they did have H3, Ethan Klein, on their podcast. When he was on their podcast, they were talking about Leafy is Here, who's a creator that is no longer on the platform. He's been banned, terminated, even though they've tried to get him back. And at the time, there was some drama going on with Ethan Klein and Leafy and another creator, Pyrocynical. So he went on to Baited Podcast and talked about all this stuff. And I mean, pretty much for the most part, the back and forth between the two of them was civil. You could tell there was a little bit of tension between them already. But what I find interesting is in the Baited Podcast, Ethan does reference the fact that Keem already sees all this drama playing out with commentary YouTubers like Leafy and Pyrocynical and Ethan as basically Game of Thrones. He even says that verbatim.
The conversation ended by me saying, Leafy, this is stupid. I don't want to make this. It's not worth it. It's not that big of a deal. Don't involve me. And I don't think you should make the video either. And I sent all that to you, Keem, and you're like, and I mean, you just were like, Game of Thrones meme. You're just like, fucking everybody's playing Game of Thrones, dog. I was like, okay.
Right off the bat, we see that this is all just a game to Keem. That's really all this is. Fast forward a year, Keem goes on the H3 podcast. Now, the weird thing about this podcast particularly is it's really short. It's only like 25 minutes long or something compared to all the other H3 podcasts, which are much longer. So I don't know if they edited some stuff out. But in this podcast, Ethan does sometimes seem to be kind of trying to egg Keem on a little bit, trying to like get him to take off his hat, to show that he's bald. And what is interesting in this is that Keem talks about how he's gone through many different channels on YouTube. His first channel got deleted because he got caught up in some sort of scamming thing where it looked like he was the scammer. So his channel got banned, and then he was able to get back onto YouTube, but channels kept getting deleted. Through some course of events, he was able to get back on the platform. So that right there shows us that Keem already has some sort of favoritism with the YouTube platform. He has evaded being banned multiple times. They had to even have somebody else on Drama Alert. Keem couldn't be the actual owner, he could be the face of it. Now I think they've actually let him take back over and it's like fully his channel. So that shows us that YouTube has favoritism towards Keem. After that podcast, Keem said he felt like everything was good, he had a good time, but then he saw that people were giving H3H3 hate for having Keem on, and H3 Productions even commented, yeah, we hate Keem too. So Keem took that personally, and then it became pretty much just like all out Keem against Ethan. It became full-blown Game of Thrones to him. Now, I think Keem sees himself as Cersei Lannister because just recently he posted a picture that said same energy. I'm wondering if maybe he forgot how Cersei's storyline ended in Game of Thrones and how her storyline really went the entire time. She didn't have a good life. So I have a feeling that he doesn't really remember how all of that played out for Cersei, because in the moment that picture was being taken, her beloved son Tommen was also jumping out of a building to his death somewhere nearby to escape the cruel fate of everything that was playing out because of his mother. So that's an interesting sacrifice that I guess Keem is willing to make. Anyway, I kind of jumped ahead a little bit. At some point, the back and forth between Keem and Ethan became too much that Keem says YouTube stepped in and mediated and told Keem they weren't allowed to talk about Ethan or anything anymore on YouTube. But Ethan apparently gets to do that. Keem has never shown any proof that these emails exist. At this point, it looks like Keem is in the wrong because we don't see any receipts of these emails existing. And Ethan has gone on to make several videos about Keem just last year, a content nuke and fallout and nuclear winter or whatever. I didn't watch them because honestly, I don't give a shit. Keem says he's not allowed to respond, but he does go on other channels and respond about this. He does go on Twitter and respond about this. I'm sure he's talked about it on his Twitch channel. He talks about it in his podcast. And we know that YouTube does hold creators responsible for things that they say and do off platform. So Keem once again has some sort of favoritism with YouTube because he has gone out and done what YouTube emailed him not to do, which is talk about Ethan and respond to him. Now, he has also emailed or tweeted pictures of horses at Gila, insinuating she looks like a horse, and he was sending pictures to the crew member of H3 Productions' wife, saying she looked like a witch. He's not getting banned or anything from YouTube. Keem says he's all about free speech and everything like that, but he has publicly said he has flagged or grabbed attention from YouTube to several of Ethan's videos. One resulted in an age restriction where Ethan was being inappropriate with a puppet doll of Keem, and that really struck a nerve with him. He felt personally hurt, apparently. He said in a recent podcast on Tommy C's channel that he didn't care about that, but why did he bring it to anybody's attention if he didn't care? So that video became age restricted, and then just recently, it would be 2 weeks ago at this point, he had another video of Ethan or H3 Productions striked and actually removed. In this podcast, what Keem didn't like was they had somebody pretending to be Keem's new 20-year-old girlfriend and pretend that Keem wasn't good performance-wise and that his member was small. That really hurt Keem's feelings, that somebody insinuated he has a small dick. That's what this whole thing was about. So he had that video striked, but, and he's even said publicly, he did not go on YouTube and strike it. What he did was he tweeted at Susan from YouTube and YouTube about this and said, hey, you said I'm not allowed to do this. Why is he allowed to do this? And in response, that video was removed. And if H3 Productions posted another video within a week, their channel would be terminated. So that doesn't look like somebody that supports free speech, Keem. You have publicly admitted to not flagging on the website, but flagging attention to videos critical of you on the platform. So what Keem is doing is trying to play this little Game of Thrones game with Ethan. He sees Ethan as, I don't know, maybe Daenerys, his like main competition in the commentary space, and he uses smaller channels to either help him or sometimes works to silence them if he thinks that they are supportive of Ethan or working with him or on his payroll per se. He attacks them. Take Def Noodles for example, which side note, I'm going to say I have been critical of Def Noodles in the past and for his coverage on some things. He recently dropped the whole cat shtick, and ever since then I have been enjoying his content again. It just feels like, it's more authentic, and he has not given Keem a moment's rest because he's had interactions with Keem, private interactions. He actually revealed that initially Keem wanted him to take over Drama Alert and take over his channel, but then when Ethan and Trisha started retweeting and interacting with Def Noodles on Twitter, it enraged him to the point where he sent a bombardment of harassing emails, including a Game of Thrones quote that says, "When it happens, I want you to know it was me." Not long after, the Def Noodles Twitter was permanently suspended. I'm not saying that Keem did it, but he did say, "When it happens, I want you to know it's me." He didn't say what it was, but you know, one could led to believe that. He's also said things to Adam McIntyre, who has been critical of Keem but supportive of Ethan and Trisha. And the commentary channel Hot Tea, he actually even sent her a video where he was just doing laps around his pool talking trash. Like, grow up, you're almost 40 years old. Stop this. What Keem is doing is he is trying to create a divide in the commentary community, where on this side you have Ethan and all of Ethan's supporters, and then you have Keem and all of his supporters. Now the thing is, the people that are Keem supporters are starting to question Keem. Not that they haven't always kind of questioned Keem, but in this instance, it's hard for some of them I've seen to, you know, come to terms with this person who they're supposed to be supporting is actively striking and removing videos. And the fact that Keem has not shown these receipts makes him look more incriminating. The receipts, of course, being these emails from YouTube telling him to stop harassing Ethan. So this is just a divide and conquer that Keem is trying to accomplish. And so far it seems to be working. Of course, then he was able to piggyback off of Gabby Hanna and her stuff for a little bit. She appeared in somebody's live chat, I believe it was Nicholas Diorio's, and very quickly on Twitter a few months ago, the apologize to Gabby Hanna trend started. This was a direct result of Gabby Hanna's T-channel video, which Keem and his supporters, his crew, really latched onto to attack other T-channels to the point where some are actually changing up content. You know what? I don't fucking care. T-channels, commentary channels, drama channels, it's all the same. Keemstar is a T-channel. I could be a T-channel. I don't care. I mean, really what it is just like some kind of stupid fallacy that he is making up to make it look like there's a difference between one kind of commentary side and the other. And there's not. There's really no difference except for the personality of the person presenting it to you. So I think that's just BS, because I have enjoyed, not so much Keemstar, but I have enjoyed some things that some of his like supporters and his side put out. But in the long run, I can't really enjoy it because I know kind of the underneath aspect of it. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyway, you have Keem on one side and you have Ethan Klein on the other. And for a period of time, Trisha Paytas was not exactly part of this whole game. Trisha was off orbiting somewhere over here. She was like, if we're going with Game of Thrones references, she was in like Bravos or something, you know, where it was like a mysterious place that nobody went to. So Trisha is orbiting by themselves somewhere else and eventually does connect a little bit with Ethan, and they, you know, we all know they go on to form the infamous Frenemies podcast, which very quickly became the most popular podcast on YouTube. They spilled the dirt, they held people accountable, and to be honest, I think this whole podcast thing is what really is the catalyst. Keem is jealous of the popularity that Ethan's podcasts get. Baited was popular, but it was short-lived because he picked people who, I mean, they all lived all over the place, so it's really hard to get you guys on the same schedule, and they were inconsistent. Keem has tried to recreate podcasts and does have a consistent podcast now, but it doesn't get the following and support and the views that Frenemies gets and some of the H3 podcasts get. It really depends on the guest for Mom's Basement, but when it came to Frenemies, everybody watched it all the time. I didn't watch every episode, but I watched quite a few of them to see what tea was being spilled, because they were tea channels as well. We all know about the breakup of Frenemies. I made a video about it. So after the end of Frenemies, Trisha went on several podcasts. They said they went on 3 different podcasts, one being the last Frenemies episode where they felt like they had been vindicated about some of the things that had happened between them and Ethan, but Ethan did not release it, and that made Trisha very upset. Trisha did go on the Tana Mojo podcast canceled, which was actually enjoyable. I did really like that, and I felt like it was kind of mature-ish enough for those two, to be honest with you. For Tana, it was pretty mature. But Trisha has gone on a few other podcasts since, including Keemstar's mom's basement. Now, the really tricky thing about that is Trisha agreed to go on Keem's podcast hours after Keem had flagged and had Ethan's video taken down. Trisha would say up and down this had nothing to do with that, but I'm calling bullshit. There is no way that you agree to break bread essentially with somebody who has been somewhat of an enemy to you, that you have been shit talking with your former best friend and soon to be brother-in-law. Because Trisha did even say on Frenemies that Keem should be deplatformed. So Trisha goes on Keem's podcast and says, you guys are jumping to conclusions. You guys haven't even heard it yet. You don't know what we talked about. It's a 34-minute podcast where they pretty much just shit on Ethan the whole time. All of them. They talk a little bit of trash about Gabby Hanna, but most of it is about Ethan and about their problems and about how he can't accept wrong and how he's a hypocrite in situations. And it was a very short podcast because Mom's Basement is a pretty short podcast already, but they film most of their podcasts in one day, so they had to shoo Trisha Paytas out because Gabby Hanna was on her way. FaZe is wearing the same clothes. Ethan pointed it out. I also think in the Mom's Basement podcast, Keem and FaZe were trying to test the waters with Trisha to see if Trisha would actually talk to Gabby on their podcast, because Gabby was going to be coming over and filming probably very shortly. So they were like, maybe we could get them to be even more views, get them to talk to each other. But Trisha was like, I am not, that's the one person I'm afraid of. I'm not going to be talking to them. And during this, Ethan cannot respond at all. Keem is saying on multiple people's channels, he goes on to another podcast the next day, the No Jumper podcast, and continues to spew the same narrative of how Ethan is always allowed to say what he wants, but Keem is never allowed to respond. In this entire week, Ethan has literally not been able to respond at all for fear of his channel being permanently terminated. But Keem is saying all that about himself. He's just continuing to try and twist the narrative that he's the victim when he's literally the one out here silencing people's free speech. What he says, he stands up for. The weird thing about Trisha is Trisha exists in this little cosmos all of their own, and in the meantime that the Frenemies podcast was also done, they had their own Enemies podcast where they would go on there. Trisha did talk about Keemstar just recently, like days before going on to his podcast, talking about his girlfriend who is 20, which I'm not even gonna go into that. She's an adult. Who cares if she wants to date a loser like Keemstar? I hope she's getting a lot of money and nice crap out of it. Do you, girl? And on the podcast, Trisha didn't hold Keem to any of this. The girlfriend was even there, and Trisha even said hi to her, and nothing. They just all continued to talk about Ethan the entire time. So after a week, Ethan was back, and the first podcast Ethan and H3 Productions made was and how they were done with them. It laid it all out. They took clips from Trisha, blatant hypocrisy over and over again. Honestly, it's like over an hour long podcast. It's like almost 2 hours. If you're interested, go watch it all. One that's very fascinating to me, though, that completely resonates with me, is the fact that Trisha will continuously attack Gabby Hanna for being a apologist, but Keemstar says the same shit that Gabby Hanna does. Says Jessie couldn't have been because her and Curtis were in a relationship at one point and all this stuff. But Trisha won't hold Keem to the stuff that they're holding Gabby to, though it is the exact same thing. It's not like, well, that's a different kind of case, it's a different scenario. No, it's the exact same situation, it's the exact same case, it's the exact same scenario, and Trisha has decided to be blind to that with Keem, but continuously rant at Gabby Hanna. I know I'm not exactly one to talk. I haven't really been talking about Gabby Hanna because one, she hasn't been doing much, and two, she just keeps talking about Jessie Smiles. That's what her last videos were about, so I'm just like, no, I'm done. But what this is for with Trisha is it's about money and views and relevancy. You get paid to be on podcasts. Trisha got paid to be on Mom's Basement. Trisha was recently on the Dr. Drew podcast, which was interesting. Trisha got paid to be on that. Trisha got paid to be on Frenemies. This is just money, clicks, and views for Trisha. Now, OnlyFans is about to stop doing adult content, so Trisha is about to be out of a huge chunk of income. So Trisha is trying other avenues. Since H3 dropped their podcast about Trisha Paytas, Trisha went and deleted all of their enemies podcasts, saying they haven't been on the internet in 48 hours, so they had no idea of anything that's going on. They feel so good. It's like, no, girl, you know what was said in the H3 podcast, and you deleted all that stuff because you don't want to deal with the drama anymore. And I get it, you don't want to deal with the drama anymore, but you've been dishing it out this whole time. Apparently Trisha is done with it. Trisha is, I think, maybe gonna start focusing on talking about their mental illness on their channel a lot more. Trisha has actually made a whole other podcast channel and everything called My Chemical Imbalance, and I have watched a little bit of it, but it hasn't been as relevant to what I'm talking about here with this, so I haven't been focusing on it as much. But in this podcast, Trisha did say they prefer they, them over she, her, but that is like okay because they present so much as female. But I'm trying to still be mindful of they, them. This fight is just gonna continue on. Even as recent as yesterday, I think Keem called into Tommy C's podcast or talk show, whatever you want to call it, and was spewing the same shit over and over again. And even in that podcast, Nicholas Diorio called him out and said, look, you haven't provided any proof of these emails that this conversation with YouTube ever happened. So right now, you look like you're in the wrong. His own people are calling him out. I guess like the storyline with Cersei, Keem is going to end up mostly alone. He thinks that he is leveling all of his enemies out and decimating them, but really he's shooting himself in the foot. So something that else that this brings to mind is the idea and the concept and the word integrity. Now, integrity is something that I hold in high regard in both how I present things on YouTube and how I live my life in the real world. I have always been taught that moving through life with integrity and purpose is key and beneficial to not just yourself, but everyone around you. And in the commentary space, we talk about integrity of work and how we're presenting ideas in thoughtful and factual ways. Now, specifically, somebody like Keemstar has attacked somebody like Def Noodles for not having, quote, integrity in their work. Perhaps they are saying things that are infactual when Keem has done that as well. He has not been factual with things that he has presented. Keem has not had integrity of things, but Keem continues to try to attack the integrity of other creators on YouTube. He attacks the integrity of Ethan Klein. So I wanted to look up really what the word integrity meant, what the true definition of it is, and here it is. There are actually two definitions: the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, moral uprightness. That's definitely not Keemstar. The second is the state of being whole and undivided. So Keem is somebody who tries to get on other people's ethics and integrity, but all he's doing is acting without it. He's literally creating an entire divide among a commentary community space for no reason. If he was so worried about the integrity of the commentary space, then maybe he should direct his concerns where it's actually necessary. What this comes down to, I think, is Keem is jealous. Keem has always wanted to be the top dog in the commentary community and have the top podcast on YouTube, and he just can't compete. He can't compete with Ethan's production and the H3H3 podcast. And then when Frenemies came in, well, it blew it out of the water. So I'm gonna wrap up this video as well, because I'm sure there's so many more points that I would like to make after I edit this. I'll probably think of some things, but I'm gonna end this with just letting you guys know that obviously I'm not Team Keem. I am not Team Ethan. I am not Team Trisha. I'm not on any of these people's teams. I am watching all this go down because it will affect me and my channel in some way. This is going to trickle down to all the other smaller commentary channels. So this is a big deal. I'm gonna leave a couple links of some podcasts that I listen to and got some bit of information if you want some more background about all of this. There will be a couple links down below. I thank you guys so much for watching this today. I hope it's not too long of a video. I will see you guys next time. Laters. Bye.